USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge for Friday, November 4th, 2022, where each week we handicap and prognosticate some top games this weekend. This podcast is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org, membership required. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Well, gentlemen, the first one on our list is one that really caught my eye. UMass ranked number 5 this week at number 14 Providence.
Yeah, these two teams have had some real good battles over the last few seasons. And I remember one year, I want to say it might have been 2019, 2020, so they didn't get to play a tournament, but both home teams lost, or the home teams lost all the games, and the home teams dominated every game. So one of those things where sometimes the puck domination and territorial time between these clubs sometimes doesn't matter. I think they both pride themselves on playing a puck possession style of game. You know, UMass, a minus 135 favorite on the road over Providence, which is plus 105. Yeah, that's almost even money right there. Over under's 5.5. I like every ounce of this line. I think UMass should be the favorite here. I wouldn't be surprised to see Providence win. Friday night's the road game, Saturday night's the home game. Wouldn't be surprised to see Providence win either of those. The over-under of 5.5. Listen, this is one of those series that you could get some really high-scoring games, but I think the sports books are really looking at the trends here. Neither of these teams usually allows many goals. They score a lot, but they don't always allow many goals. So I think that is really why you get a 5.5 as your over-under. Probably as low as you're going to see, typically in a college hockey weekend. So I like that over-under. I wouldn't bet that. Too dangerous. If I did, I'd probably shade it to the under because I could see a 3-1 or a 2-1 here. But I think I like UMass on the road in this one to open this weekend series. They're coming off a loss in overtime on the road against Merrimack. I think they'll be on top of their game.
Yeah, Jimmy, I agree. I like UMass here. And part of the reason is that UMass feels like the best team in Hockey East that nobody's talking about. There's a lot of high end talk about Connecticut and a lot of talk about Providence, especially last weekend, given, that Providence was one of our games that we talked about. Or if not this week, 2 weeks ago. But UMass seems to be one of those teams that everyone just expects to play really well. But they're just churning along and staying nationally ranked highly nationally ranked. And it just feels like there's an element to this, which is no one's really talking about UMass the way that they should. And coming off the loss against Merrimack, they have a statement that maybe they need to make in this game. So if we're looking at the odds and it's almost even money, there's a part of this that says, I just run with the favorite because they should be a probably bigger favorite than they are in my mind.
When I think about the history of Providence over the last 3-4 seasons, I sort of have a feeling that they have tended to lose games they should win and surprise us in games that they should lose. And I don't know if that's a trend that'll continue this season, but that kind of leans me a little bit towards Providence if I were going to make a pick on that game. And I think that's what I picked in our Friday column is Providence at home, just because of that little bit of uncertainty.
Yeah, you know what? Nate Lehman, their head coach, had a great line to me last week. And he said, last season, we won almost every major statistical category. We were high in goals. We were high in goal against efficiency. Our power play was great. Our penalty kill was great. Our face-off percentage was great. What wasn't great? Our record. We found ways to lose games we should have won. And I think that's one of those frustrating moments for a coach. Does that mean that they could win games that they're not supposed to? I mean, I go back to last season. I think they were down 3 or 4 against Denver and ended up winning one at home. So maybe you can sometimes pull them out. But right now, Providence is, again, doing enough to get by this season. They've had some good games. But, I called a game of theirs, I think it was last weekend against UNH, where I felt like they did everything especially over the last 40 minutes of the game to win the game, and came out with an overtime tie and a shootout win. So I still think that this team feels good about itself. I don't think that they're probably in the frustration mode they were toward the end of last year, but I do know that this is a team that sometimes can be one of the best in almost every category statistically and still not put up wins.
Well, let's move on to the next one on our list, and that is two unranked teams, but a great rivalry in the CCHA as Michigan Tech travels to Bowling Green.
Yeah, interesting series. And the reason I threw this on was more for the rivalry and for what these two teams have done in the CCHA and back in the WCHA. I mean, they've had some really good series over the year. When you look at the standings every year, you take, I'm not taking Minnesota State out for any reason, but, when you look at the teams that are challenging in the CCHA, it usually is Bowling Green. It usually is Michigan Tech. And there's not a big sample size of games played among these teams right now. And right now, neither has a fantastic winning percentage. Tech, not bad, 4-2-1 overall, but Bowling Green just 2-6-0. I think that they'll become better. I think this team has a lot of ability. Right now, they're giving up a lot of goals. 30 goals against in just 8 games. That's kind of a high number, and that's not going to cut it, and you're not going to get enough wins that way. But then you look at Tech, and they've played 7 games right now. They've allowed just 11 goals. But in that, they've only got 4 wins. So you're doing a great job keeping the puck out of your net. You're not scoring goals. So I think right now the line, Michigan Tech minus 130 on the road, Bowling Green, even money at home. The over under 5.5. I love the under on this one. I think that this is literally going to be a 1-0, 2-0, 3-1 maybe game, throwing an empty netter. Neither of these teams have high efficiency in their offense, and they're going to have to continue to improve this season if they want to do something. Now, I guess when you get these two teams next to one another, you can probably throw that out, but I tend to kind of ride that. The fact that Tech has been so stingy defensively this season, I don't mind thinking that this game is going to go under and maybe way under. This could be a 1-0 or a 2-1 game.
Well, and in addition to that, Jimmy, if we're talking about the over-under, then we're talking about, even if Bowling Green's giving up a lot of goals and Michigan Tech isn't, there's no balance in there. So if we're talking about 5.5, even if Tech's able to score a bunch of goals against Bowling Green and get up to 4, we're still hitting the under. So you're really relying on a 4-2, 5-1, and I don't see that happening here at all, regardless of anything. This isn't like last week when I was talking about Western and Michigan, and I was like, well, you're going to see something weird and the numbers will go up and then you'll see the goals scored. It's going to be wild. This isn't a rivalry that's going to do that. I mean, these teams aren't structured that way. Whether or not, we're talking about a rivalry, even it's a rivalry that's going to keep the goals down. It's not going to be a rivalry that drives the goals up. So I regardless of who wins in a rivalry game, and I think it's always a pick 'em when you have that situation. I don't like the odds on anybody in one of those games, but I will say the under is looking pretty juicy because even if Bowling Green doesn't get itself corrected, and Michigan Tech stays the course, then we're still going to need a whole heap of goals to even hit that over under anyway.
I got to lean Michigan Tech on this mainly because of goaltending, and that's where the defense starts. Blake Petola is at .944 on the season. He's seen most of the action in net for Michigan Tech. Meanwhile, the goaltending tandem at Bowling Green is sub .900.
That's a big deal. You've got to have those numbers in goal, and I think that right now, and it's really a big part of why I kind of agree with Dan. You have to lean under here. And I go back to last week's Notre Dame game. They were playing Michigan State, and the over/under was 5.5. And the first night, Notre Dame explodes for 5 goals. One of their best offensive productions of the year. They still went under because they shut the team out. 5 is still less than 5.5. So I feel like that's the type of situation we could have here. You end up with a Michigan Tech team that puts up 3 or 4. They're still going to probably limit it to 1. They're not giving up 5 goals in a game, Michigan Tech, and they're probably not even giving up 4. They're playing good defense right now, and as Ed said, it starts with goaltending.
Yeah, and just to tack onto that too, even if Bowling Green's numbers improve over this weekend, you still need a lot to get to 6 goals and hit the over. with these teams, which I know it was just to kind of reinforce what I was saying earlier, that even if those numbers that don't correct and don't course correct at all at any point in time this weekend, or they do course correct, I should say, you still need to be able to get a 4-2, 4-3. Someone's got to probably hit 3 or 4 goals. And if that happens, I just don't see the offense in this to do that.
Well, let's pause here. We've got 3 more games to look at, plus an interesting question to consider. USCHO Edge is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
Know how people say life happens? Well, for me, life was happening, and I needed a new truck. I didn't have time to shop around for a good loan, so I got one from the dealer, higher interest and all. Month after month, those payments were squeezing me. So I went to DCU. They refinanced my loan and helped lower my rate, which lowered my payments. These days, I have more money in my pocket for whatever life throws at me. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
We're back with USCHO Edge. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Minnesota returns home to Mariucci after a split on the road last weekend at Ohio State. The number 3 Golden Gophers are heavily favored over number 12 Notre Dame.
And they should be heavily favored. Minus 205. That is a very heavy favorite. You're on home ice. There's something to prove. You lost a game last week. You lost your number 1 ranking, dropped from number 1 to number 3. I think that Minnesota has plenty to prove. But hey, is there any coach in the Big Ten right now that gets their team to perform in some high-level situations better than Jeff Jackson? They don't win championships, but they've been darn close a couple of times. But I'll tell you that there's one coach I don't love facing when it's a game that you feel as a higher ranked team, the team that should win, that you're just going to pull it off. Notre Dame is dangerous, and at plus 165, I love that value. I think that you're not going to see Notre Dame in a plus 165 scenario more than 3 times all season. So if you're looking to bet Notre Dame and know that they're a pretty good team, know that they've got the defense, know that they've got the goaltending, I think that they become a really dangerous team in this situation. That value of plus 165, that's a good value for bet. Over or under of 6, I actually think that number could be a little high. I know that we're 3 weeks, Ed, from having a long conversation about how many goals are being scored in college hockey. Now the first 3 games here, I'm saying you should probably be going under, but this feels like a game that could be a 3-1 game. Notre Dame's defense and goaltending has been phenomenal. They every now and again pop out and score goals. We know that Minnesota can score, and when they get going, they'll score a lot of goals, but I don't always have that expectation for Minnesota. They can go on power outages. So I look at this one this weekend, both nights, you're probably going to have similar lines. And I wouldn't be surprised to see, a 4-1 or a 3-2 game between these two teams. So I actually like the under here, and you get the push possibility if you get a 4-2, where you don't lose any money. You don't win anything, but you don't lose money.
I legitimately hate this game betting wise for that reason. I just don't like. It's easy money to burn on Notre Dame here because the odds are so long for Minnesota in comparison. And that's probably why I just don't like this game in general. It feels too even for the odds. So that means bet the underdog. I mean, that means go after Notre Dame, and that means with plus 165 to go after it. But if you don't think Notre Dame's going to win the game either, then you can't do that. So I don't think it's going to be a particularly fun game to bet because I think Notre Dame could win it, but I also don't feel confident in that right now, given everything about Minnesota, especially at home. So I know I think I picked the Gophers this week. I'm pretty sure I picked the Gophers. I just don't like it. And that was one of those, I'm going to pick the favorite because I don't like this game and I feel like I have to make a pick. And I agree with you on the over under. I think this could be a little high given the offense that we've seen. That said, if you're feeling dangerous and you're feeling lucky and you're going after Notre Dame anyway, why not bet the over on it? See if you can get a little weird in this game, because I think this also has a better than average potential to have one of those weird games that you look at and you see a 5-2 in there or a 4-3 or something like that.
Yeah, and one point just to make, I'm going to try to make comparison for Minnesota. They've probably only played one team that has a defensive style like a Notre Dame, and that's Minnesota State. In those games, the scores were 4-1 and 3-2, a win and a loss in that order. So I think that there has the potential to be a lot of goals scored, but I think if I had to bet, I still stay under on this.
You know, Jim, you mentioned goaltending as part of this. There was a lot of going into this season with the graduation of Matthew Galajda, what it would look like in net for the Fighting Irish. Ryan Bischel has been terrific at .934. Meanwhile, in the Minnesota net, Justin Close is at .900. So that could figure into this again, like we mentioned above, for Michigan Tech.
Yeah, you know, Close has not put up the same numbers that he did down the stretch of last season, where he was absolutely fantastic. And that, you know, is this kind of, can you consider this a sophomore slump? I mean, he didn't play much for his entire career. He gets thrown in there late last season, ends up being, you know, phenomenal. But now you're back here, and it could just be the opponents. It could be, you know, a small sample size. I know Ohio State had their way with them last Friday night. But, you know, I still think that he's a good goaltender. Having Bischel in there for Notre Dame, again, an experienced goaltender that, you know, Jeff Jackson has hammered this transfer portal for his goaltending. And he's done a good job with it. So I feel like that is one of those question marks that answered itself pretty early for the Irish.
Well, let's look at number 10, North Dakota at Omaha. To my eyes, this seems like North Dakota has lost a little respect from the odds makers, going 1-3-1 in their last 5 games. They are really only slight favorites, the number 10 Fighting Hawks on the road at the Mavericks.
Yeah, lost respect. I mean, it's almost like Las Vegas is laughing at them in their face. A -130 North Dakota on the road at Omaha, and Omaha has not had a great start to their season themselves. They're even money in this game to win at home against North Dakota. Come on, guys! Like, what are we doing here? There's no way in my mind that North Dakota loses this game. They are a better team than probably their record shows. They've had some trouble finishing games. They've had some trouble scoring goals at times. But God, this North Dakota team is too talented, too good to be that slight of a favorite. You're not going to get -130 on North Dakota on the road against an unranked team again this year. So I would be all over North Dakota in this game. The over-under is 6.5. I'm going way over. I see this being a 6-2, 7-2, 7-3 game. Maybe that, you know, North Dakota's defense has not been perfect. They're not allowing a lot, but I see this game being a high-scoring game. I love the over in this one. Omaha, I can't see it. I you know, good number being even money at home against North Dakota, but you know, if you're going to beat North Dakota, I think you should be getting paid about +190, not even money. So I like North Dakota in this one, not just for the line, but for the actual outcome. I think that they're gonna be hungry in this series.
Yeah, this didn't make any sense to me. Period. End of story. I mean, I think you summed it up nicely. But this was, you know, you're reading over it, then you look back and you're like, all right, let me see if I can find something in here on North Dakota that I wanna justify in my own head statistically. And it's not there. I mean, this is not. Yeah, they've run into it a bit and they've dropped down the polls from I think where a lot of people might have expected them, but that just stripped a little bit of respect. And if you motivate North Dakota with that lack of respect side of it, this is a team that's going to go out and probably pound away at somebody. I mean, they're going to bully Omaha this week, and I'm with you, Jimmy. And maybe I'm wrong. Conference, you know, all that other good stuff that goes with it. You know, notable game. I don't see it. And so North Dakota with those odds, forget it. And I'd take the over too. I mean, this is going to be, if they're trying to send a statement, they got to score a lot of goals to do it. Not that matters whether you win a game by 1 or win a game by 6. But I think if you win a game by 6, you feel a heck of a lot better about the respect coming your way. So hammer the Hawks. Not even close on that one for me.
Yeah, and they've already taken some money. Just noticing the line since I put this out last night. The line has changed to North Dakota -140, Omaha +110. So it's slid a little bit. The early money that has been bet has been on North Dakota. No surprise there.
Well, have you ever met a North Dakota fan who would ever bet against North Dakota?
No, that's why Las Vegas cleaned up. When they were on Las Vegas last weekend, trust me that the sports books cleaned up.
Oh, yeah.
After a little bit of a shaky start, Omaha has to be feeling a little better, although the 2 wins were on the road against LIU, 2-1 and 7-1. This feels like more of a desperation weekend for North Dakota than it does for Omaha.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not surprised. I know that they probably don't get to choose because they're on the road, but they had their business suits where they would wear those black uniforms on nights that they felt they had to get a win. I feel like this would have been one that they would come out in their black uniforms. They still might do that. I'm not sure how it works in the NCHC about choosing colors and all of that sort of stuff. But if they can wear their black suits and it's still kind of their tradition, I would expect them in black on Friday night.
The last one on our list has number 4 St. Cloud State traveling to number 2 Denver. The Pioneers are fairly significant favorites in this game.
And at home, I think that they've started to prove, since that UMass weekend, that kind of felt like a little bit of a lost weekend. Denver's played some really good hockey. So minus 155 is a favorite. St. Cloud State, they've had still a very good season, plus 125, took their first loss. But this is one where I have a hard time actually committing to either one of these teams here. I think the fact that Denver's at home, they'll get my vote. And if I had to make a bet, I don't love the 155 minus 155 against a team like St. Cloud. So I'd probably end up staying away from this one. I might even take St. Cloud just because of the fact that you get a little bit better value. This is a team that still only has 1 loss, but they are still a plus 125 underdog. So you don't get you're not going to see a lot of value on St. Cloud State. I know that I've said that a couple of times in this podcast, but there's teams out there this week that you're not going to see the value that you are right now throughout the entire season. Over under 6 in this one. I think that's a good number. It's as the season has progressed, we've noticed these books starting to really start to take notice. They're paying more attention to the line. I think we go back to week 1. I'll make this, and I know this is going to roll right into your next point, Ed. Week 1, I think we had something like 17 or 18 games that were live to bet on DraftKings. This week we have 7. So I think the sports books themselves are being more conservative and even cautious as to what games they're putting out lines on, because they know that if they don't have enough data and enough research and maybe not enough time to do their homework on these, they can start getting killed on some of the lines they set. But I feel like this week we have 5 games here that all the lines were set right and all the over-unders were set well.
I'm with you on that over-under. So I'm noticing the difference now between a 5.5 and a 6. 5.5. I mean, if you're looking at a game that's a 6 and it lowers to a 5.5, you're going to feel real good about betting the over on that, looking for a 4-2 that gets set at a 4-2 score is basically what I'm coming to. But the minute it gets set at 5.5, that you're going to feel great about it. The minute it switches to a 6, you're not feeling great about it anymore. And I think that taking note of that is important, that those numbers are not just arbitrarily set and saying, all right, this team scores 3 goals a game, this team scores 2 goals a game, whatever it is, it allows 2 goals. I think that plays into it. But the more data that becomes available and the more that these get set, those over-unders are going to be a lot harder to bet and to realize where they are and what they are.
One thing Jim ran into looking at games for us to talk about this week was not being able to find a line for the Michigan-Penn State series. Now, we had a chance to talk to Guy Godowski. His team traditionally likes to run a wide-open offense. Michigan is putting up bucket loads of goals and is maybe even perhaps more of a juggernaut this year than last year. Any idea why there aren't odds for that one? And if you weren't putting together odds, especially over under, what would that look like?
I think it's dangerous. This is a dangerous one. For one thing, I think Michigan happens to be one of those teams, and Penn State might be another, that tend to get a lot of action. You have live sports betting in those states. College sports is included. So one of those things that if you put the lines out on those schools, you're going to get a lot of activity. And if you don't feel good about what you're putting out there as a line, it becomes more dangerous. And this is one, I think, if there was an over-under, we've never seen one higher than 6.5 this year. I would have expected it to be around 7.5. And I could go through every NHL line tonight. There's a ton of games tonight. and I will not find any higher than 6.5 anywhere. I'm seeing 7. 7 is the highest, and that's the Devils and Edmonton. But every one of these over-unders is between 5.5 and 6.5 for the most part. To get higher than that, and to get higher than 7, so to go to 7.5 or even 8 is just outlandish to these sports picks. They took too much risk on the low side. But when you look at Michigan and Penn State, the two highest scoring offenses in the country right now, you could expect to see, and especially coming off Michigan, where it was 20 goals that they combined for with Western last weekend, you could see in 2 games a combined 20 goals again between these two teams. It wouldn't shock me an ounce. If you had a 7-6 game in here, it doesn't shock me. It would absolutely positively shock me to see a 3-2, a 2-1, or anything lower than that.
I'm convinced that every line and every over-under includes an element of caution in general, which is built in not as an insurance, but it's just built in as a cautious tale from the books and the odds makers and people who do it. They're not going to recklessly set something. And if there's too much caution or there's too much concern, they're just not going to set it.
Yeah.
So I think in this case, Michigan, Penn State, like you said, Jimmy, the over-under, it makes sense to set it at a 7 or a 7.5. But since that is such an insane line to want to put it to for a college hockey game, they're not going to do it. So because that under scares, you don't want to take a bath if you're a sports book on the under. So they're just not going to set it. I mean, if it seems too good of a matchup and it makes too much sense to set odds one way or the other, you're not going to see it. And I think that's what we're seeing more and more, even as the number of games have come down, that we're seeing, some of these matchups just make too much sense to install a heavy favorite or a heavy underdog, that they're just not going to list it. And it just is not going to be something that we see. They're still going to have action, and there's still going to have people who want to look for action on those games. But, and this is the big but, is if there's too much risk involved, they're not going to list it.
Yeah. And the one thing that surprises me is I think that they probably could have set a money line odd, set a puck line odd. We never talk about the puck line. It's more confusing sometimes to talk about, so I usually stay away on these type of podcasts. Set those and then just leave over under off the board. That's something they books could have done. We haven't seen anybody do it yet. I'm not on the ground in Las Vegas to know if anybody like the Westgate or Caesars or MGM are actually putting those lines up out there, that maybe not put them on their apps. But it does seem strange. It's such a big game. I think a lot of people will be paying attention to that game, that series this weekend. It should be really good hockey. But I feel like we're going to have some scrutiny as, hey, why is nobody picking the Michigan Penn State series? And well, there's your answer.
If they did put an over under of 8 or even 8.5, I might be inclined to take the under, simply because I don't think Penn State has been tested yet the way Michigan has. And I think they're going to run into a team not only that can play really good offense, but that is good defensively. And so maybe this will be a chance to kind of clamp down on Penn State for the first time this season.
We'll see. I still think that Guy Godowski's team, and I said it to you, I think off the air yesterday, this team shoots from the popcorn stands.
Right.
There's not a shot out there that Penn State doesn't like. They find ways to get pucks through the nets. They make it a numbers game. And if they finish this weekend series with 90 shots on the Michigan net, I'm not surprised.
Well, you're going to see a lot of shooting. Penn State's averaging almost 43 shots a game, in Michigan 38.
Plenty, and there's plenty of goals to go along with it.
Well, there's and one last thing, if I could just throw in here too, as I hear that, is how do you pick the team that's going to score more goals if we're going to look at 8 goals in a 5-4 or something like that, when you have teams that are shooting 70-something goals, shots on goal a game? I mean, how do you pick the one that's going to score more? If there's such a Murphy's Law that these teams are going to fire away, I mean, you don't. This is as much of a pick'em as anything that I think I've seen in college hockey, simply because of that. Like that's wild. It's 70-something shots. That's a lot of hockey that's getting fired at the goalies.
Well, we'll probably wrap it up there. It should be entertaining, even though nobody's going to be able to wager any money on it. And really, they play the games for the entertainment, not for the bettors. But we're here for the people who like to wager a little bit too. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of USCHO Edge, which has been sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org. Find our podcast at uscho.com/podcast or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Edge.